Essentially, half of what we're thinking of as mating intelligence is the mental fitness display stuff that Scott has been talking about, and I'm going to be talking about what we're calling the cognitive mating mechanisms. What about all the cognitive abilities that relate directly to human mating? Cross-sex mind reading, right? Understand what she thinks. Do I know what she's interested in or he's interested in? Detecting infidelity, which we can think of as a facet of emotional intelligence. Can you tell when someone is showing signs that he or she has cheated on you? Assessing one's own mate value. Where am I? How attractive am I? What should I be shooting for? Assessing value of potential mates. Strategic flexibility in the mating market. If I'm at a school where it's 90% people my own sex, I might play a very different game than if it's 10% people my own sex, and assuming heterosexuality in this case. So there's a lot of things about human mating that really require a good bit of higher level cognitive work that we can think of as a kind of mating intelligence. So these abilities underlie human mating psychology, and they often include adaptively biased tendencies. This is sort of an evolutionary spin that I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking predominantly about research that I've done with my students at SUNY New Paltz on mating relevant cross-sex mind reading. We looked at how well do you know the desires of potential mates, so we came up with a way of measuring that facet of mating intelligence. And we looked at whether there were systematic biases in mind reading that are relatively intelligent. Is it sometimes smart to err? So this is just a slice of mating intelligence. Mating intelligence in general is much bigger than just the scope of this particular study. In thinking about how to measure mating intelligence, I looked back to the work I had done on the topic of emotional intelligence. And the way that emotional intelligence is typically studied, Peter Salavan on this campus is famous for helping develop this model, is pretty much people will look at an emotionally laden stimulus, such as this woman's face, and they would rate it on some numerical scale, happiness, for instance, 1 to 5, or fear, 1 to 5, and they would look at a particular individual's response in the context of all the other people who responded. So if 1,000 people looked at her and said she's about 4 on happiness, and you put 4, then that means that that's a relatively emotionally intelligent kind of response. So we decided that we would use a similar kind of method in our first stab of measuring mating intelligence. So when we operationally define mating intelligence or tried to measure it in this way, we used a similar model, and we looked at the degree to which participants, means people in the study, can accurately guess which personal ads were rated as most attractive to members of the opposite sex. So people were given a whole bunch of personal ads, and they were told which one, if you're a man, you were told which one of these ads written by men you think women found most attractive, and vice versa. And we also looked at the degree to which the errors, you can see that we went an awful lot into the nature of the errors and whether or not the errors were adapted in some way. So here's an example. This is a stimuli from an example we call short-term mating intelligence, male example. So these were written by men, and men are looking at them, and men are trying to guess which one of these 3 the women wanted to have sex with. And a big sample of women in the same study made that judgment, looked at these, so we actually had something of a right answer. So the first guy, first option, these are real personal ads, by the way. This guy, he's not hiding anything. I love sex generally, and bleep in particular. Someone pointed out to me when I first gave this talk that I might want to bleep out something there, so I did. This person's explored the kinky, so I'm not sure exactly what that means. So that's one kind of personal ad. So here we have person number B is taking a very different tack. I'm going to go more humble every day, and you can see at the very end, I'm a decent gardener. Right? Kind of sexy, right? Decent gardener. And finally, we have C is given, the kind of standard thing that's a nice thing to say, best thing in life for free, so it sort of seems like a nice guy. And the women were asked which one of these men had to have sex with one of these 3 guys. And then the men were asked which one do you think the women would want to have sex with. So that was the task at hand. That was the male short-term example. We had 4 indices in total, so we had that male short-term, then we had male long-term, where men were asked to try to guess what women would want for a marriage partner or a long-term mate, and then we had female counterparts, where female trying to figure out what men wanted for a short-term partner and what men wanted for a long-term partner. So we essentially have these 4 different ways of looking at mating intelligence. So this is the way we did the analyses, and I'll try to walk you through it. It's a little statistical, but it's not too bad. So we have the three options. E, this is what's called a chi-square analysis. E means expected, but in this particular case, the expected frequency, or percentage in this case, is the percentage of women who actually made that choice. So of the real women in the study, 36% said, I like that kinky guy. 31% like the decent gardener guy, and 33% like the other guy. So the women, in reality, were sort of evenly split. When you look at what the men think the women want, there's a little bit of an error. They sort of downplay, underestimate options B and C, and they're sort of saying, hey, that guy's exploring the kinky, the women must be. And the fact that that chi-square is significant, if you've taken stats class, hopefully you know what that means, but it pretty much means that those observed numbers, the men's guesses, were significantly different than the women's actual desires. So this is a case of error in this particular judgment. So that was one of the male short-term examples, and we ended up having, there were 10 male short-term examples, 10 male long-term, and so forth. So there were a bunch of statistical tests we did for each of these four categories, and one of the first things we did was we looked at how good are people at this test? Where do we tend to see the most accuracy? Where do we tend to see the most error? Males making long-term judgments was by far the most accurate. When that chi-square is small, when it's closer to 0, that means that there's less error, and as that number increases, it's always a positive number, as it increases, that means that there's more and more error. In this particular case, the fact that male long-term judgments had the smallest chi-square means that they were actually generally accurate. Men, believe it or not, seem to know what women want in marriage partners and long-term mates, based on how we did this research. So that was generally accurate. The next one I'm calling in scientific terms not too shabby was men making short-term judgments. They're trying to guess what women want for a short-term sexual partner. And they erred more than when they were making long-term judgments, but not nearly as much as the females erred when they were making judgments. When females made long-term judgments, the chi-square is 35.81 on average, which is a very big chi-square. They were off when they were trying to guess what the men want in a marriage partner. They seemed to be really missing the boat. And when they were trying to guess the bottom one, what do men want in a short-term sex partner, they really missed the boat. That was by far and away the most erroneous set of judgments that we saw. So that was kind of interesting. And we can think of this, if you know social psychology at all, as a rare case of males demonstrating superiority. Usually the story goes the other way. But then we can reevaluate the question. Is accuracy necessarily the same thing as intelligence? Not necessarily. There's a bunch of work by evolutionary psychologists who've addressed this kind of question. Hazelton and Buss talk about error management theory. And they essentially, the short version of error management theory is there's lots of conditions under which it's actually more evolutionarily advantageous to have a bias that's usually going to be right or will ultimately protect you from making a really bad decision when it comes to your reproductive success. So one such example they talk about is that males overestimate sexual interest on the part of females. We can think of this as the, I think she likes me that way, bias. Men tend to over-sexualize. There's some classic research by someone named Abby in the 1980s where they'll show a black and white picture of just a man and a woman, and it's kind of ambiguous what their relationship is, and they'll ask women how sexually interested is the woman in the guy in this picture. Women tend to say, I don't think very much, and they'll ask men the same question, and the man will say, I think she digs him, I think she's into him. So there's this tendency for men to, all things being equal and ambiguous stimuli, to sort of over-sexualize females' intent. That might be, given that males have relatively low parental investment, that might be relatively adaptive, and they might be more likely to turn up sexual opportunities with that mindset, even if it's often erroneous. Alternatively, also based on parental investment theory, females tend to be commitment skeptics. We can think of this as the all men are pigs bias. So instead of hearing a man say, sure, I love you and I'll stay with you forever, women don't necessarily buy that immediately, and they tend to push men quite a bit until they seem to believe that, and women are more likely to think that men are just interested in sex, perhaps even more so than is actually the case. And that's evolutionarily adaptive, related to what Scott was talking about, because women have very high costs in terms of parental investment to successfully reproduce. They have an awful lot of time related costs. So it's going to be really in their interest to try to secure a mate who is really going to stick around for the long term. So these are two adaptive biases that Hazelton and Voss talk about. And it occurred to me that we can look at the research that we've done with personal ads using exactly the same way of thinking of these adaptive biases.